When you think of the samurai, you probably think of honor, bushido, and fancy sword duels. But the samurai weren't really like that. Well, except the fancy sword duels, that part was very real. Samurai were often devious and self-serving, especially the subject of today's video, Ashikaga Takauji. The Muromachi period often gets overlooked by casual history buffs. Many just see it as the boring prologue to the Sengoku Jidai. This isn't too surprising. After all, the Sengoku Jidai is by far the most famous time in Japanese history. It's the time period that most people picture when they think of medieval Japan, as well as being the setting for a bunch of historical anime and video games, filled with famous samurai like Oda Nobunaga, Takeda Shingen, Tokugawa Ieyasu, and Musashi Miyamoto. But I think they've gotten more than enough attention. The Ashikaga shogunate deserves some love too. After all, it was their shoguns that set the stage for over a century of conflict. It was also a fascinating time period in its own right, filled with epic battles, sneaky plots, and ruthless characters, none more so than the shogunate's founder, Ashikaga Takauji. Now there was one devious son of a bushi. I swear that guy might even put Oda Nobunaga to shame with all his scheming and backstabbing. Takauji's story also serves as an important historical lens, through which we can better understand medieval Japan and the mindset of its ruling class. How did the Ashikaga rise to prominence? Well, to understand that, we have to go back to Japan's first shogunate, the Kamakura shogunate, which was created by Minamoto Yoritomo after winning the Genpei War. For more on that war, check out these channels. In summary though, the Genpei War was a war fought between two major samurai clans, the Minamoto and the Taira. The Minamoto emerged victorious and created the first government in Japan's history ruled by samurai. This was a pretty big deal. Before this, Japan was ruled by emperors or powerful court officials. Samurai were mostly left to squabble amongst themselves in the provinces, without much political authority. Well, no longer. Now the warriors would have their turn in running the country. Unfortunately, the great leader of the warriors, Minamoto Yoritomo, only ended up holding power for a few years before he died, and his family line went, extinct. For the rest of the Kamakura shogunate, the country was governed by his wife's clan, the Hojo. The Hojo were a minor clan, and as such they could never hold the shogun title directly, so in order to maintain their grip on power, they appointed members of more prominent clans, like the Fujiwara, or imperial princes to serve as their puppet shoguns, while they held power as regents. Everything was going great, until the Mongols attacked. While Japan was able to eventually defeat the Mongols thanks to a little divine wind, the Kamakura shogunate came out of the war pretty much broke. The cost of having to maintain so many troops and so many fortifications drained their treasury, so when the samurai came asking for rewards for, saving their own country, the shogunate told them, "Sorry, we're broke. Here's a coupon though." Naturally, the samurai, being greedy little bastards, didn't take that all too well. Unrest began to spread throughout the country's warrior class, as samurai began to look for other ways of making their fortune, often by resorting to banditry. It's in this period of unrest that the Ashikaga clan first rose to prominence. The Ashikaga were actually descended from a branch of the mighty Minamoto clan, named after the town of Ashikaga in Japan. Despite their impressive lineage, they served under the Hojo clan as retainers. Ashikaga Takauji, the hero, or villain, of our story, was one such retainer. By all accounts, he was a smart, level-headed man and a competent military leader. And also a ruthless schemer eager to climb the ladder of power, hell-bent on decimating his enemies, willing to stop at nothing to achieve his goals. But hell, we all have those days, am I right? The timing couldn't be better for Takauji. All the instability meant that skilled warriors like himself were in high demand. By this point, discontent in the country had reached a boiling point, and it was about to boil over into an uprising known as the Genko War, a war started by the Emperor, Go-Daigo, against the Shogunate. Now, this is where things might get a little confusing. You see, Japan at this time wasn't really one unified country. The Emperor technically ruled Japan, and the Shogunate was technically subordinate to him. In reality, though, they had a power-sharing arrangement, where the Shogunate ruled the east, near its capital of Kamakura, and the Emperor ruled the west, near the imperial capital of Kyoto. Of course, no one wants to rule only half a country, so over time the Kamakura Shogunate usurped more and more of the Emperor's power, until finally, in the year 1331, Emperor Go-Daigo had enough. "I declare war on the Shogunate," he said, to mostly crickets. As you might imagine, picking a fight with a bunch of professional warriors turned out to be a pretty dumb move. Go-Daigo promptly got his butt kicked and then exiled to an island in the middle of nowhere, kind of like a future French emperor. In 1333, to the surprise of everyone, Go-Daigo made a stunning comeback and launched a new rebellion. The Hojo regent at the time, Hojo Takatoki, dispatched his trusted general Ashikaga Takauji and another general to crush this uprising just like the last one. As the two armies marched to Kyoto, the other general walked right into an ambush and got killed. This left Ashikaga Takauji as the most powerful general in the country, and the gears in his head started turning towards betrayal. In all likelihood, Takauji had always secretly resented the Hojo. After all, the Ashikaga descended from the great Minamoto clan, which ranked them well above the lowly Hojo. So why should they be taking orders from these low-class losers? There is some evidence that Takauji intended to betray the Hojo all along, since most of the soldiers in his army were his own loyal retainers. But it's also possible that, seeing the strength of the rebels and the weakness of the shogunate, Takauji simply realized that fighting for the Hojo was a lost cause. After receiving an official letter from Emperor Go-Daigo, gotta have those receipts, the rebels were able to swiftly capture Kyoto and reinstall Go-Daigo as emperor. This marked the beginning of the end for the Hojo clan. Many samurai saw that the tide was turning and began to switch sides en masse. One of these samurai was a Hojo retainer named Nita Yoshisada. Remember him, he's important. On orders from Emperor Go-Daigo, Yoshisada marched his army to Kamakura and captured it, forcing many members of the Hojo clan to commit seppuku and putting an end to the Hojo's dominance. The Kamakura shogunate was officially over, and the emperor was back in charge. Thus began a period known as the Kenmu Restoration. It wouldn't last long. Trouble began almost immediately between the two leading generals of the new regime, Yoshisada and Takauji. Emperor Go-Daigo was partly to blame here. He kept playing both men against each other, encouraging their mutual distrust, likely in an effort to prevent either one becoming too powerful. The other part was that their two clans had some bad blood between them. Literally. To us in the modern day, arguing about obscure family ties might seem silly, well, unless you have a 23andMe subscription. But one's lineage was a crucial aspect of Japanese culture, both back then and even today. Tracing your family line back to powerful figures like the emperor, or important clans like the Minamoto, gave a ruler legitimacy. In this case, the Nida clan was from a more senior branch of the Minamoto, so you can imagine Yoshisada's frustration when the inferior Takauji was given a higher rank at court than him. Yoshisada was furious and made no attempt to hide it, constantly talking shit about the Ashikaga at court, which you can imagine just thrilled Takauji. It's also kind of ironic because Takauji had likely also complained of the Hojo's inferior lineage back when he betrayed them. But hey, being a samurai and being a hypocrite go hand in hand. Pretty soon, however, tensions at court were the least of the government's worries. To put it simply, Emperor Go-Daigo wasn't a very good ruler. He thought he could just turn the clock back to the age when the court nobles ran the show, ignoring the political realities of the time, including the power of the samurai class. You'd think after relying on the samurai to help him take over the country, he'd promptly reward them for their service. But no, he chose instead to give away most of the spoils of war to his friends, the court nobles, as well as members of his own imperial family. His ingratitude really pissed off the samurai, and if you remember, they were already pissed off to begin with. First they get stiffed for saving the country from the Mongols, and now this? Then, to rub further salt in the wound, Go-Daigo gave the title of shogun to an imperial prince, a certain Prince Morinaga, again, favoring court nobles over samurai leaders. This was also a huge slap in the face for Takauji. As one of the most powerful generals and arguably the man who helped Go-Daigo come to power in the first place, he had expected the position as a reward, only to have Go-Daigo royally snub him. Now, that's not to say that Go-Daigo was just being a dick here. The Ashikaga were already gaining a lot of power, and he didn't want to risk another strong shogun challenging his authority the way the Minamoto had. Here is where we get to see Takauji's leadership qualities, and more of his devious side. Unlike Emperor Go-Daigo, Takauji made sure that his samurai were well rewarded, ensuring their loyalty, while at the same time making his faction more appealing to other warrior clans. Win-win. Takauji also played his hand at court intrigue. For that, he enlisted the help of his younger brother, the equally devious Ashikaga Tadayoshi. Tadayoshi was the political brains to Takauji's military might, kind of like another famous brotherly duo, Minamoto Yoritomo and Minamoto Yoshitsune. Through various schemes, Tadayoshi was able to arrest the shogun at the time, Prince Morinaga, on a flimsy pretext and hold him prisoner in Ashikaga lands. He was also able to install another prince as puppet governor of a province neighboring Kamakura, ensuring Ashikaga control over the former shogunate capital. Slowly but surely, the Ashikaga were solidifying their control over the east. Still, Takauji was unable to gain a decisive advantage over his rivals, especially Yoshisada, so he chose to bide his time, until one day an opportunity presented itself. One of the last surviving members of the Hojo clan, Hojo Tokiyuki, raised a rebellion and managed against all odds to recapture Kamakura, scattering all imperial forces. Not one to let an opportunity go to waste, Tadayoshi used the chaos of the retreat to quietly execute the hostage Prince Morinaga, leaving the position of shogun vacant. Takauji, meanwhile, saw this as the perfect opportunity to solidify his control over the east for good. Without getting the emperor's permission, he marched his army towards Kamakura, and, in a series of battles, defeated the Hojo pretender, recapturing the city. With the old shogun dead and the eastern capital of Kamakura firmly under his control, Takauji declared himself the new shogun, and immediately began redistributing the captured lands to his loyal retainers. Because, unlike Emperor Go-Daigo, he knew how to treat his followers right. Then, just to stick it to Yoshisada, Takauji gave away the Nida clan's home province to his mother's clan, the Uesugi. What a power move. Takauji wasn't just being petty here either. He knew doing something so brazen would force the emperor and the Nida to declare war, and give him an excuse to destroy his enemies once and for all. When Emperor Go-Daigo learned what Takauji had done, he flipped out. How dare this guy betray his master after previously betraying his master? He has to be punished. Urged on by an equally furious Nita Yoshisada, Go-Daigo fell right into Takauji's trap and declared war on the new shogun. In an almost comical repeat of his first rebellion, Go-Daigo got absolutely demolished by the Ashikaga.
A shameful display!
Takauji and his forces were able to quickly capture Kyoto in a lightning campaign, but then their fortunes took a sharp turn for the worse. They ended up being defeated by imperial loyalists and forced to flee to the province of Kyushu, over here. Ironically, this was also the site of the Mongol invasions that kicked off this disastrous chain of events in the first place. A lesser man might have given up right then and there, but not Takauji, oh no. Instead he fell back on what he did best, scheming. Together with his brother Tadayoshi, he was able to persuade the clans of Kyushu to join his side, probably showing him that, unlike Go-Daigo, he actually rewarded those who followed him. With his army rebuilt stronger than ever, Takauji marched on Kyoto once more. In a few battles, it was all over. The imperial loyalists were crushed, Nita Yoshisada was killed by an arrow, and Emperor Go-Daigo was surrounded. In a bid to stall for time, Go-Daigo gave Takauji the imperial regalia, the symbols of the emperor's power, as a sign of his submission. Then, while everyone was busy admiring his family jewels, he quietly fled to the southern province of Yoshino. From there, Go-Daigo would continue to claim his right to the imperial throne until his dying day. Not that it mattered much. By this time, everyone knew which way the wind was blowing. This way. Takauji soon found another member of the royal family and propped him up as the new emperor, beginning a period known as the Northern and Southern Courts, when there were two rival candidates for the imperial throne. But aside from that minor dynastic squabble, Takauji and his Ashikaga shogunate was now firmly in control of Japan, and it would remain that way until the next power struggle. Key takeaways from this. Family lineage was extremely important for rulers in medieval Japan. Only those with premium blood could hold positions of high office. This would become extremely relevant in the subsequent Sengoku Jidai period, where samurai leaders would try to assert their right to the shogunate. We can also see that samurai were now the dominant political force in the country, firmly supplanting court officials and imperial princes. Samurai loyalty, however, did not come cheap. In order to maintain control over the country, a ruler was expected to give his followers rewards, usually in the form of land. This expectation, and the failure to fulfill it, led to instability and was the downfall of the Hojo, Emperor Go-Daigo, and eventually even the Ashikaga shogunate. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it informative. Hopefully it piqued your interest in the Ashikaga shogunate and Japanese history in general. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more interesting videos on history and other topics. Catch you next time.